Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Vanessa Loder, who's here to share with us her new book, The Soul Solution, a guide for brilliant, overwhelmed women to quiet the noise, find their superpower, and finally feel satisfied. So welcome to the show, Vanessa Loder.
Thank you so much for having me, Marianne.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. What inspired you to write this?
Well, they say you teach what you most need to learn. And I would say for me, it was inspired by hitting my own head against the glass ceiling and a wall of exhaustion and just wondering how I could quit the hustle without giving up on my audacious dreams.
Well, and it's so interesting because so often women, we get into the workplace and we think, okay, these are dreams I have. I want to reach these goals. I want to do these things. And we get there and we are so unfulfilled. It's not funny.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was my own experience where I was, an overachiever my entire life. I went to an Ivy League school, graduated top of my class, worked on Wall Street, got my MBA from Stanford, was, everything on paper looked great. And I had, in theory, climbed to the top of the ladder only to realize wrong ladder. I thought once I got to some sort of end destination of success, I would have the joy and the fulfillment and really the peace of mind that I was longing for. And yet, no matter how much I achieved, I found myself lying in bed at night with my mind just racing, thinking of all the things I didn't get done that day and all the things I needed to get done the next day. And I remember having this moment where I thought, this is success, this feeling of constantly striving and trying to meet other people's expectations, not taking care of my own needs. So I felt like in some ways the playbook itself was flawed. And I started to question, my own definition of what it means to be successful, what it means to quote unquote have it all. Because I think for a lot of women, we've internalized messaging that having it all means we need to do it all for everyone else all the time. And so I had my own kind of crisis breakdown, and I started learning and studying about mindfulness and the neuroscience behind stress and how to, lower my stress and anxiety using neuroscience. And I got trained even in things like hypnosis and past life regression healing. I mean, I really kind of got like a PhD in soul searching. And I ended up changing so much that I quit my job in finance and have built a business over the last 10 years, teaching some of these tools and strategies to other people, and particularly to women. And so the book is really a culmination of a lot of what I've learned over the last decade. And in a lot of ways, I consider it a roadmap to come back home to yourself, to your own inner truth, your inner wisdom and guidance, and learn how to trust that and live from that place at your own center when you go out into the world.
I'm kind of wondering, so when we get to this point where we're doing the work, I mean, for you, was there like a point that it kind of clicked like, oh, I am doing the wrong thing? I mean, how did you find out, the thing that's really driving my heart?
Right. Such a great question. For me, for some people, there's a major crisis that triggers an awakening, like frankly, the death of a loved one or the ill or severe illness of a loved one or of yourself. One of the signs I talk about in the book is how the body never lies. So a lot of women who come to me are struggling with things like unexplainable migraines, chronic pain, back pain, hypertension, insomnia. So those can be some of the signs. Sometimes people are jolted into this type of awakening with a crisis, like a health crisis or a relationship. For me, it was more this slow, quiet tug that began inside myself, just this feeling of I'm meant for more. I know in my bones there's something else out there for me. And I would look at the partners at my private equity firm and think, here I am, I'm on track to be a partner at this firm. I'm vice president, I'm making plenty of money. And yet I would look at them and think, I don't really want that job. And then I remember thinking, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm lazy or just not motivated. What's going on? And I was on a walk along the beach in Crissy Field in San Francisco. And for me, and I think for a lot of people, being in nature is a way to reconnect with, your core self, what I would call your soul. And I was on this walk thinking about my life and all the things I'd done and the paths I had taken, the paths I had not taken. And I was thinking about quitting my job. And for a while, I had decided I was maybe going to start this baby products business, actually. And I had done a consumer survey and market research, and I was going to raise venture capital so I could pay myself a salary as soon as I quit my job. I was being very Stanford MBA about the whole thing. And then I went on a walk along the beach, and I had this moment where I thought, wait a minute, what am I doing? I don't give a crap about baby products. I'm just thinking about this business idea because I think it's a good business idea and it would make money, but I'm not actually passionate about it. If I start this company, I'm just going to be an unfulfilled entrepreneur instead of an unfulfilled private equity investor. And it was this moment where walking along the beach, this thought came through me where I thought, my entire life, I have been following my ego, my mind, and my wallet, and not my heart or my intuition. And maybe that's why I'm so unfulfilled. And I remember thinking of that expression, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you always got. And so I thought, well, if my goal is to find deeply fulfilling, satisfying, purposeful work, maybe I should take a radically different approach. And instead of doing what culture or our society deems is the next most valuable or important thing, maybe I should try an experiment. So what I did is I decided, all right, I'm going to quit my job with nothing planned. And all I'm going to do for 6 months is follow my heart and my intuition. I don't even know what that means. I don't even really know how to do that. But that is my commitment to myself with the clear intention of finding work that I love. So I'm doing it in service of that goal. And I figured if at the end of the 6 months I hadn't found something I really enjoyed, I could always go back to finance or, take a safe job again. And it was wild, Marianne. Within 2 weeks of quitting my job, all these people started coming to me for coaching advice because they wanted to quit their jobs. And at the time, I was paying attention to what I call in my book, your energetic breadcrumbs, which are those moments when you feel really energized and alive and curious about something, or when you have more energy at the end of an activity or a conversation than you did at the beginning. And I noticed I would leave these coffee meetings and lunch dates with all these people who wanted coaching advice, feeling so energized. And at the time, I was 3/4 of the way through a coaching certification just from my own, soul searching, not thinking I would turn it into a business. But that was one of my first early energetic breadcrumbs where I thought, oh, wow, maybe I want to go into executive coaching or leadership development. And things unfolded so rapidly from there. It was wild. And a lot of the tools and processes that helped me get the clarity I needed are exactly what I outline in the book, The Soul Solution, because I want other women to learn this way of being, this type of process to unpack and uncover your own energetic breadcrumbs and your own unique gifts, the things that you're naturally really good at, that you really enjoy doing. Because what I found is when you want to create a deeply satisfying life, you kind of have to live from the inside out instead of from the outside in. So instead of focusing on what other people want from you, you really have to take some time and space alone to get clear on what are my core values and what are the beliefs that I've internalized around what it means to be successful or to be a working woman or to be a mom, and how can I unwind some of those and choose with more intention. And the more, the soul-based path, it's nonlinear, it's not strategic, it's not predictable. You don't necessarily know A leads to B, leads to C. Sometimes A leads to Z, leads to D. So I think it's a very different way of doing life.
So before we go too far down the road, I'd love for you to explain what the Soul Solution is for our listeners.
Sure. So it's a book for women who are tired of doing what they should do or people pleasing, achieving for achievement's sake. They're looking for more. They don't, they want to have it all, but they're tired of how society has defined what all really is. So they're looking for more, but they don't really know what that is or how to find that. And fundamentally, the Soul Solution offers a roadmap to learn how to listen to and trust your own inner guidance and inner truth in any situation, big or small, so that you can create a deeply satisfying and fulfilling and joyful life.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Do you ever get like women that come up to you and say, well, I don't really have a deep connection with my intuition. I'm not really sure what to do. I mean, how do they go forward at that point?
Yes, that happens all the time. And that happens to all of us if we haven't kind of been on this type of path or lived in this way before. So many women say, what does that even mean? And the thing is, everyone, your instincts are there. Sometimes you just need to bring them to the surface a little bit more. And it really is just like going to the gym and weight training. The more you start to tune into your intuition, trust it and follow its guidance, the easier it becomes to strengthen that ability going forward. And I like to joke, when women are like talking to me or reading a book, they'll say, I don't really know if I'm how to follow my guidance. And I'll say, well, here you are talking to me right now. What led you to that moment? But there's lots of little ways to start to strengthen that muscle. And that's why I talk a lot about the concept of energetic breadcrumbs, because it's a very easy and accessible way for us to start paying attention to our intuition and to our body's signals and our energy signals. So what you can do is you can just start to journal each evening, do what I call an energy audit, where you'll journal on, okay, what brought me energy today? When was I in a flow state? When did I have more energy at the end of an activity or a conversation than I did at the beginning? And really start to peel back the layers of that. So if you were really energized in a conversation with someone, what was it specifically about that interaction that energized you? Was it the person you were speaking with? Was it the topic you were talking about? Was it that you offered some insight and you could tell it really landed with the person? So you're just starting to notice the things that make you feel alive and track them. And then you're going to learn how to engineer your life to have more of those kinds of experiences.
That's such a great analogy, being able to, because you can visually see the breadcrumbs. You're like, okay, this makes me happy. I'm enjoying this. I feel like I'm resonating with that. So I think it makes it easier for women to really go to find what it is that brings them joy.
Exactly. And, sometimes these things can sound a little bit, I don't know, esoteric. And so it can be helpful to have stories of how other women are applying these tools. So one of the stories that I think is really helpful is I had a client years ago who worked in nonprofit, and she was tired of fundraising. So she didn't want to work at this nonprofit anymore, but she still wanted to do something to make the world a better place. And so I had advised her to start to tune into her intuition and follow her energetic breadcrumbs. And so she said, Vanessa, I've always been interested in video editing. I know it's so random. And here's the thing, Marianne, our soul whispers, what I call our soul whispers and our energetic breadcrumbs, our ego and our mind often will judge them as random or weird or insignificant or not important or just crazy. So if your mind is coming in thinking something is quote unquote random or weird, that's actually often a sign that you are on track with something that is really resonating with your soul, your core self. So anyway, she said, okay, it's so random, but I've always wanted to take these video editing. So she found a video editing class at Stanford and for alumni and took that. And then separately, this woman invited her to coffee she had no strategic reason to connect with this person. And yet she said, I can't explain it, Vanessa, but something inside of my body like kind of got excited or jumped up when I got this invitation. So I listened to it and I trusted that impulse because you're telling me to follow these energetic breadcrumbs. So she went and got coffee with this woman. 4 months later, that woman that she got coffee with introduced her to another person who was looking to hire someone to help nonprofits tell their stories through video. And that's just a perfect example. And so she was the ideal candidate for the job and she got it. And that's how the breadcrumbs can unfold. She wasn't at a place where she could have articulated, what I want to help nonprofits tell their stories through video. She didn't even know that. And even if she had defined that, she could never have figured out that woman was going to introduce her to that other woman. She couldn't have in a linear way predicted all of that. And yet by following her own inner impulses, her natural inclinations, the things that made her body, I talk a lot about when something feels like a whole body yes. This is something I got from my mentor, Katie Hendricks, versus when it feels like a whole body no, or when you get a whole body maybe. So how can you start to listen to that wisdom and honor it in the choices you make in your daily life? And when you do, you'll be amazed at how much better your life will get and how quickly things will unfold for you.
So how can we differentiate if we are listening to our soul or to our ego? What are some of the kind of like key phrases to let us know who's in the driver's seat?
Yeah, really great question. And, I actually even have a chart in the book to help explain this, because even though I talk a lot about soul, I'm still an overachiever. So, there's a checklist in the book, but basically the ego has this quality of never enoughness to it. And it's often pushing, is this loud, demanding voice internally, versus the soul voice. It's kind of like a gentle tug or a gentle whisper, or it pulls you. The soul voice is very unassuming. When you hear it in your own mind, it's like a very little whisper. And what I like to talk about is how the soul often comes through in these little slivers of silence we create in our mind, versus the ego is like loud and adamant and demanding all the time. The ego is also focused on control and pleasing others. It's very logical, realistic, strategic. It likes to have a predetermined plan. It's a little more about force and effort. It often feels unsatisfied, or as though you're chasing external validation, or you might feel stagnant or burned out, or you're focused on advancement rather than alignment, or maybe you feel unworthy or in fear. The soul, on the other hand, has these qualities of surrender and grace. It's about pleasing yourself, savoring life. It's often irrational or non-strategic. So you might label it as crazy or weird, as I mentioned, or, doesn't make sense. It has this emergent, meandering quality to it. It's much more when you're in a state of flow or ease. You feel clear and fulfilled and connected to your inner values. It also leads to these feelings of expansion and creativity, energy, feeling energized and aligned. And it's also, at its heart, based in this feeling of being intrinsically worthy and grounded in love. That I translate this for, working women, because I think the word soul can feel, not everyone resonates with it, and it has a lot of baggage to it. And it can almost feel intimidating or daunting. Like, well, I have to connect with my soul and find my soul's purpose. Like, how do I do that? And so one of the things that I've done to break this down for working women is to think about it as going from a state of hustle to a state of flow. So whether you're working on a project at work, or if you're at your school at a networking event and you're like, I got to make more friends, I got to network, and you're in kind of a hustle energy with it, you can feel what that's like in your body, versus when you're in a state of flow and you have a clear intention, but you're also trusting that everything's going to work out well. So helping women, I have a lot of resources and guided meditations and classes I teach on how to go from a state of hustle to a state of flow. And I think that's a way that's a little more tangible to kind of get us out of ego and more in a core self or soul-centric way of being.
I really appreciate in your book, you talk about choosing to feel good instead of should. And that's such a big deal, because so many women do that. They get that should, and they're like, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. We overcomplicate things.
Yes, so true. And so what I've learned in my own life and, supporting hundreds of women is when you are saying I should for any sentence, that's a great red flag that you're out of your truth. So, I use the word should as a red flag in my own life. So if you're saying anything like, I should, stay at this job because XYZ, or I should go to my friend's, party, even though I'm exhausted. I should volunteer at my kid's school, all these things that we do. And the thing is, sometimes you really do want to do that thing. It is aligned for you, but the timing is not aligned because for whatever reason, you're really tired that day or that week. And we still push ourselves and say yes to things that we don't want to do. And so part of the soul solution is to start to say no to what's not aligned, because that is actually what creates the space for what you really want to come through.
Do we need to really prioritize time for us?
Yes, we do. Virginia Woolf talked about this in A Room of One's Own, and I really think she was onto something there. For women to have our most creative and fulfilling lives, we need space and time alone. And as I started digging into some of the research about this for when I was writing the book, I was shocked to find how much women's time has been trampled on for centuries. And if you think about it, historically, women have been kind of the gatekeepers of men's time and protecting time for men. So think about The Good Wife, Don Draper and the Mad Men, right? She's protecting the man's time so he can have quiet reflection in the evenings, or the good secretary, who's sort of the gatekeeper of the man's time at the office. And I think many of us as women have internalized some of that old, outdated messaging. I noticed in my own life, we would go to these kids' birthday parties in our neighborhood, and the number of times the moms were interrupted mid-sentence because someone fell down and needs a Band-Aid, or they didn't get the snack they wanted, or whatever. And the dads, I would look over. I'm not kidding. I went to one child's birthday party where the dad had set up a bunch of chairs and a keg in the garage, and all the dads went there and just hung out. And then the moms and the kids were all in the backyard, and the moms could not get three quality sentences strung together without being interrupted by someone bumping heads on the trampoline, and there was an injury, and there was this and there was that, and they spilled their juice, all the things that kids do. And I remember just thinking, why is this the default? The majority of these couples are dual income couples, and yet the moms I did not sit down once at this entire children's birthday party. And for me, that was kind of a revelatory moment about how things have been set up and why women are so dang burned out and exhausted, because we really are burning the candle at both ends and we're not getting a break. Historically, women have been kind of the gatekeepers of men's time and protecting time for men. So think about The Good Wife, Don Draper, the Mad Men, right? She's protecting the man's time so he can have quiet reflection in the evenings, or the good secretary, who's sort of the gatekeeper of the man's time at the office. And I think many of us as women have internalized some of that old, outdated messaging. I noticed in my own life, we would go to these kids' birthday parties in our neighborhood, and the number of times the moms were interrupted mid-sentence because someone fell down and needs a Band-Aid, or they didn't get the snack they wanted, or whatever. And the dads, I would look over. I'm not kidding. I went to one child's birthday party where the dad had set up a bunch of chairs and a keg in the garage, and all the dads went there and just hung out. And then the moms and the kids were all in the backyard, and the moms could not get three quality sentences strung together without being interrupted by someone bumping heads on the trampoline, and there was an injury, and there was this and there was that, and they spilled their juice, all the things that kids do. And I remember just thinking, why is this the default? The majority of these couples are dual income couples, and yet the moms I did not sit down once at this entire children's birthday party. And for me, that was kind of a revelatory moment about how things have been set up and why women are so dang burned out and exhausted, because we really are burning the candle at both ends and we're not getting a break. It's really important for women to break away from all the demands, the outside demands, and get some time and space alone to ask some of these deeper questions.
I would think the moms also could be a little bit frazzled if they're taking that time off and checking in with the family, making sure their house isn't burnt down and everything's going okay. Because, it seems that things get a little chaotic sometimes when they were with their dads, but that's because they're not used to that, right?
Yes. And I love, Tiffany Dufu's book, Drop the Ball, right? We do have to be willing to let go of control and let things slip through the cracks. And I actually went away this past weekend for a day and a night. And this is the thing I think a lot of women do. I wrapped the present for the birthday party that my daughter was going to be going to while I was gone. And then while I was there, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I told my husband to tell her to make the homemade birthday card to go with the gift, but is he going to remember? And I was thinking of texting him. And then I said, no, he's in charge. He knows that a card should go with the present, and he's responsible for that. And he and my daughter, and if they don't figure it out and this present goes with no card, no house is actually burning down. But what I've write about in the book, and I noticed in myself, is that it's kind of almost like not scratching an itch sometimes to make yourself not do all the things, because we're so used to doing all the things. And so you have to catch yourself as you're about to do too much and stop yourself. So that's not an easy task, but once you're aware that not only are you exhausted, but you're actually creating these codependent enabling relationships with other people where they then depend on you to keep doing all this stuff. And so you have to drop the ball if you want these patterns to change.
So in your book, you talk about creating our soul boards. What are those and why would we use that?
So the thing about the soul is it doesn't really talk in language or words. It speaks in symbols, in images, in longings, in feelings, in dreams. You might get messages from your soul in your dreams, in signs and synchronicities and curiosities. So the soul board is a great way to tune into the wisdom of your soul. And what you do, I mean, some people have heard the term vision board, and it's very similar to that. You get a bunch of different magazines and you do a meditation. I recommend doing a meditation to connect in with your heart center first and set a clear intention. And then you're going to look for images that, again, give you those energetic breadcrumbs. So there's something about this image that just speaks to you, even if your logical, rational mind doesn't understand why you're choosing that image. So it's a practice in starting to tune into and trust that inner wisdom, that inner authority. So you cut out all these different images and then you paste them onto a poster board, and you can do it for different categories of your life or for a specific goal. And then the other thing, when you look at those images, you're speaking directly to your subconscious mind. So a lot of work has shown that our conscious mind that we think is running the show, it processes information at about 50 bits per second versus your unconscious intuitive nervous system processes information at 11 million bits per second. So 50 versus 11 million. So there's a lot of horsepower there that we're not leveraging. And the subconscious mind, again, speaks through images. And so when you look at this soul board, at these images that just make your body feel like a whole body yes, you start to attract and draw in the people and the places and the situations that will help make that vision a reality. And one of the things I recommend is to actually dance in front of your soul board. So once you've made this beautiful board that has all these images of things you want, you play a song that really gets you into a happy state or high vibration state, and you actually dance while looking at those images, and that juices it even further. And, I had one woman lawyer once at a retreat who was like cutting out pictures. She's like, Vanessa, when you asked me to do this exercise, I was like, how is cutting out pictures really going to help me get clarity on my life? And she goes, and then I found a picture of this like abstract farmhouse from this old art calendar that someone had brought in. And she goes, and I just knew I had to make an offer on that house. It's so bizarre, but something in me just knew it's time to make an offer on that house you've been thinking about. So this is how we can get messages from our soul sometimes, is through images that elicit a somatic or a physiological response in our body.
Seems that all comes together with dedicating that time to ourselves where we can actually envision what our new future could look like.
Yes, that can certainly help. Yeah. And it can also help to get a tribe around you of other women. So you can maybe get a couple girlfriends together and do this as a fun craft project one night.
Well, that sounds like a good thing to do. Maybe a book club, right?
Yes. Yeah. I actually have instructions in the book for how to lead a visioning circle and create a book club around this, because I have found that, it might be hard for us to take time and space for ourselves, but we can always say to a friend, oh, girl, yes, of course you should take some time alone. And so we can be those cheerleaders and those advocates for each other. And it's the same with visioning. One of the chapters on the book is all about how to vision your ideal life. And with visioning, I found is, how you could say to your friend, of course you should apply for that promotion. Yes, you're totally qualified. And yet when it comes to ourselves, we feel like, I don't know if I'm qualified enough. It's the same with visioning, where it's often easier to see a bigger vision for another woman's life than we can see for ourselves. So that's another area where you can really expand what's possible by harnessing the power of a group or just one or two friends who can help you see a bigger vision for yourself and your life.
In your book, you talk about radical responsibility. What is that?
So radical responsibility is really owning your side of the street and how you maybe contribute to things. There's a great equation that I learned from Jack Canfield, which is E plus R equals O. And what that stands for is the events in your life plus your response or your reaction is what determines your outcome, the O. And we usually don't have control over the E, but we always have control over the R in that equation, which is our response or our reaction. And a different response can give us a totally different outcome. So in the book, I outline a framework to how to go from complaining about something in your life to making a bold new commitment about what you really want. Because I think many of us, we can get stuck in, kind of victim mode or martyr mode. And trust me, I've been there a lot. Where it's sort of like, woe is me, all these things are happening to me. And so one of the ways as women we can take our power back is to recognize that we have more control than we realize. And that starts with recognizing how we are contributing to our current circumstances and taking responsibility for that. And it's never a fun moment to take responsibility. It does not feel good. And yet on the other side of that is where our power lies.
Yes, you often hear of people when they start doing that, it's like they go through their mind process and realize, wow, I'm really negative. I have to switch that around,
Yes, exactly. So catching ourselves in those negative loops and recognizing, frankly, how sometimes we create our own suffering. I mean, there's an expression in Buddhism that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And it's not fun, as I've said, when you're in a downward spiral and you catch yourself. At first, at least for me, I'm almost always really cranky and resistant. Like, I don't care. No, I'm not really making myself miserable. I mean, I know I am, but I get mad about it, before I really want to take responsibility. But the thing is, catching yourself in that kind of downward spiral and then doing a shift move, thinking, okay, well, what can I do to change my energy, to change my mood in this moment? Like, what's one thing that's going to help me get back to an upward spiral? And that's sort of how you can start to take responsibility. And then that's also how you can, feel more empowered in your life.
Yeah, it's changing that voice of the inner critic, and that's got to be pretty tough to do when you're so kind of wired. You've been negative for a while. How do we make that switch?
Yeah, there's a lot of tools and processes I outline in the book, because that is another big piece of the soul solution, is to learn how to shift your inner critic into this wise inner coach. And so I've studied a lot with Kristen Neff, who's the leading researcher on self-compassion. She's amazing. And so there's three main steps to self-compassion: mindfulness, loving kindness, and then also recognizing that you're not alone in your struggles. My favorite super quick self-compassion tool I actually got from Jen Sincero's book. And what it is all you do when you catch yourself. Let's say you yelled at your kids and then you feel guilty, or you made a mistake at work, or you said something in a meeting at work and then you were like, oh, that was not articulate. I shouldn't have said that. What most of us do is for the rest of the afternoon, we beat ourselves up like, oh, I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I said that. And then we feel worse and worse about it. And then, let's say we are like commuting home and we're thinking about that situation at work and we're getting more and more worked up. And then we get to our front door and a loved one opens the door and greets us. And we snap at them because we're in a bad mood about that thing that happened at work. Next thing we know, we're in a huge fight and dinner is ruined. That's what I would call a downward spiral. So what you want to do is catch yourself when you're in that cycle, because your brain, the first time you said that thing in the meeting and then you cringed, you actually released adrenaline and cortisol in your body, which starts to, have a chemical reaction. When you replay that scene 17 more times for the rest of the afternoon, guess what? Your body doesn't know the difference between the actual event and the perceived one or the imagined one. So you're releasing cortisol and adrenaline, you're having that response over and over again. And so that's where that equation E plus R equals O can be useful, where you notice, oh, wait a minute, my response right now is to keep replaying this terrible thing that happened. That feels horrible. So let me choose a different response. Let me think of 3 things I can appreciate about myself and how I've showed up at work lately. Or what I was going to say is that my favorite quick self-compassion tool from Jen Sincero's book, You Are a Badass, is all you do is you say to yourself, I'm just a little bunny doing my best. And it sounds so silly, but it kind of pops you into humor. And try it the next time, you yell at your kids or you make a mistake, and just go, take a deep breath and say, I'm just a little bunny doing my best. And it just reminds you, we're all human. We're all messing this up many times a day. I mean, I wrote a whole chapter in my book about it, and I teach about this stuff, and yet I struggle with it daily. I remember a time I was dropping my son off at preschool, and these other 2 moms were talking in the parking lot, and they were like so cool, and I wanted to be friends with them. And they looked kind of like not done up, but they were in like nice yoga clothes with like their makeup on at whatever, 8:30 in the morning. And I was in sweats with a big stain on my chest and like a puffy vest I've never liked. And I hadn't washed or brushed my hair. And the 2 of them were talking, and I stood kind of, like I said, hi. And I stood sort of behind them, waiting for them to invite me into the conversation. And they kind of did, but they mostly just continued it without me. And I just stood there awkwardly for several minutes. And then I just left and got in my car and drove home. And as I was driving, I started beating myself up like, oh, look at you. You haven't washed your hair. You have like no cute clothes. You have no friends. Nobody likes you. Like all the things the voice was saying. And I caught myself in that moment, and I had a soul solution moment where I shifted and I thought, okay, I'm just going to take 3 deep breaths and I'm going to look at the beautiful trees around me and notice the leaves rustling in the wind. And I just presenced myself and I calmed myself down. And then 1 minute later, this voice came back and was like, well, I mean, you really should maybe buy some cute yoga clothes and like those cute new sneakers you've been looking at. And this time it was still the inner critic, but it was sneakier because it kind of sounded like a caring friend or a relative who just wanted me to upgrade my wardrobe. But it was still coming from a place of feeling inadequate and not good enough. And I really found myself thinking about like which clothes and shoes I should buy for a couple minutes before I caught the voice and was like, oh, dang it. That was still the inner critic, just like, coming in a sneakier form. And so our ego is very creative and it can cut, it'll twist and turn. But if you pay attention, you'll start to catch yourself in these moments and make a different choice. So again, I just paused, I presenced myself. I set an intention to be kind and gentle with myself. I thought about 3 things I did appreciate about my current wardrobe. That's another great game I like to play is whatever way you're criticizing yourself. So some days I feel like I'm not being a good enough mom. Other days I feel like I'm not being a good enough entrepreneur and I haven't done enough to build my business. So wherever I'm feeling inadequate, whichever category, that is the category I will then appreciate. And I'll think, okay, well, what are 5 things I've done really well as an entrepreneur today or in the last month? Or what are 5 things I've done well as a parent this week? Oh, my kid had a meltdown and I was really patient with her actually and really calm. And I stayed with her through that whole meltdown and didn't lose my marbles. That was really great that I did that. And so you're just starting to steer your ship in a slightly different direction in all these micro moments. And all those micro changes, they add up over time to real lasting transformation.
I understand that's when you have your mommy timeouts, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. My kids tell me to take mommy timeouts. Well, here's the funny thing too. I mean, I love the irony about what I do because here I am attempting to coach women on how to listen to the soul versus the ego and be more mindful. And I'm just as human as everybody else. That I got to tell you, I mean, it's been hilarious even telling people about this book I wrote that's all about differentiating from soul and ego. And yet my ego keeps coming in and being like, you didn't sell enough books. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So the mommy timeouts thing is really funny because I was speaking at this event with all these entrepreneurs and women leaders from this exercise club called the Daily Method. And it was for all their franchisees and their owners. And one of the women said, oh yeah, we have this chime bell in our house. And anytime anyone in the family gets really upset, like angry, or they're yelling, or they're having a big emotional response, anyone in the family can go and ding the bell, and everyone has to stop what they're doing and take 3 deep breaths. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a great tool. This is like everything I teach, and it's such a great way to bring it to the family. So I came home from that talk and I told my kids and my husband, I was like, you guys, I got this great idea. We're going to get this bell and and she said she got her children to help choose like where to put the bell in the house. So my kids got really into it. And I had, of course, a little meditation bell. So I was like, okay, where do we want to put it in the house? And so we found a special table for it. We put it in there. And in my mind, I'm like, I think I'm thinking I'm so superior and I'm going to train my family to be more mindful, right? Guess who got dung on the bell first for being really angry? Me. Within like 2 hours of putting the bell out in the house, we were in the kitchen and I got really frustrated about something. I started raising my voice. And at the time, I think my son was like 4. He looked me in the eye and he ran straight to the bell and he started dinging it. I was like, oh my gosh, I got dung first. And it was just, I mean, it's very humbling to teach all this stuff because, I'm just, like I said, you teach what you most want to learn, right? So yes, my children. And so now when I start to get heated, they'll just be like, Mommy, do you need a timeout? I'm like, yes,
God.
Mommy does. Mommy needs some quiet time to calm herself down.
That is too funny. It's interesting with you bringing this into the family, man, your kids are going to have such a head start because not only are you showing them how to do different practices, but we're also human. It's going to
Yes.
happen.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I think, we've grown up with this weird parenting ideal, like the parents should be the authority figure who has everything figured out and doesn't ever struggle, as if I think the old model was that we thought that would serve our children. And I think what a lot of parents are discovering is that it actually helps kids to know that if we can be vulnerable and authentic with them and share our messy selves and our messy lives. I mean, of course, we need certain boundaries and certain authority to stay in place. Like if I'm having challenges in my marriage, I'm not going to talk to my kids about that. But, a lot of our daily struggles, when we share them with our kids and with other people and friends, I find it always brings us closer.
Can easily see how that would come together. And kids are so just perfect because they're going to be the first ones to go ring that bell if anything's out of place.
Yep. Yep. So I learned.
What a great exercise. What a great exercise. My goodness. Well, and I know you go into this you have so much that talks about the inner critic and how we work through that. And I love this example that you give. What are some other examples that you have?
So one of the other things you can do, I have a whole guided meditation on my website. You can find that on the book page, because it's great to do a guided self-compassion meditation. So there's lots of, apps and places where you can find that. You also want to tap into common humanity. That's one of the aspects of self-compassion that PhD Kristen Neff talks about. So some version of recognizing, oh, other people have felt this way too. So the first step is to acknowledge your suffering, like, oh, this is hard for me. I'm really struggling with this right now. The second step is to access common humanity. Oh, other people have struggled with this too. I'm not the first parent to yell at their kids, or I'm not the only one at work who made this kind of mistake. So you want to find common humanity. And then the third step is to practice this loving kindness and to just see if you can find a way to be kind and gentle to yourself. And what I have found works the best is actually to imagine a really good friend of yours, maybe your best friend, is in the same situation that you're in. So they made the mistake at work that you made, or they yelled at their kids. And think about, what would you say to them? And I actually will write it out in like a paragraph form. Okay, my best friend Beth is struggling with this exact dilemma, even though she's not an entrepreneur, but you just pretend that she's in your situation. What would you say to her? And I'll write it out, a few sentences. And then what you do is you offer those same kind words to yourself. And because it can be really hard for us to be kind and gentle to ourselves in the beginning, if you'd like, if it works for you, you can imagine that other person, your best friend, saying those things to you that you just wrote down. And that's like a great way to very quickly access a more compassionate voice in your own mind.
I love that. I think that's such a great exercise. When we look at our just generational, how we're being brought up and our viewpoints, doesn't that have a huge impact in what it is that we believe as we go forward in life?
Yes, it does. We've internalized a lot of beliefs. There's this one client, this story just really stuck with me. She had her mom grew up very poor, and they lived in Singapore. And then they ended up extremely wealthy, where they had like 8, servants, nannies, housemaids, a driver, like a chauffeur, all the things. And she said her mom, who grew up really poor, but was now very, very wealthy, if she came home to the house and there was a package of hot dogs that was expired or about to be expired, her mom would cook the entire package and eat eight hot dogs in one sitting, because she couldn't let any food go bad. So she would just eat this whole package of expired hot dogs, even though she had, servants and maids and nannies who would make her any meal she wanted. And to me, that story so illustrates the way that we have these patterns and behaviors and beliefs that, stem from our childhood, and they're very formative years. And that's why I'm a real big fan of neurolinguistic programming, one of the modalities I'm trained in, because it really helps us work with our brain to rewire it to create the change and the new behaviors we want. But one of the ways you can do this in a very simple tool is to do something I call sourcing your beliefs, which is, you'll choose a category of your life, like let's say what it means to be a working mom. And you'll just write down in a journal, like, what did my mom say about what it means to be a working mother? What did my dad say about what it means to be? And even not in words, perhaps, but what did they infer through their behavior? What is the messaging that I got from, maybe you were adopted or you're raised by a grandparent, you don't have a mother or father, but the primary caregivers, what was the messaging you received about what it means to be, let's say, a working woman? And then you'll write down, what did teachers or the media say about that? What does our culture at large say about that? You could add any other influential figure in your life or even a celebrity. And once you have all that on a piece of paper, it can be really eye-opening to go, oh my gosh. And then what you do is you'll ask yourself, well, is that messaging I received growing up, is that something that I want to intentionally continue to believe going forward? Or would I rather cultivate new and different beliefs myself? And so much of this is deeply, deeply unconscious. I know when I had my daughter, I felt all this pressure to lose the baby weight in like 4 months. And nobody ever in my whole life sat me down and said, you know what you need to do? You need to lose the baby weight in 4 months. But where did I get that idea from? Oh, guess what? Look at a magazine and it shows all these gorgeous women on oh, Giselle, look at her post-baby body. She's on the beach in a bikini, and she looks amazing. And so you see all this messaging, and as women, we are constantly bombarded with these gold standards of beauty, of health, of parenting, of being the ideal worker. And so what we've done, being the good girls that we are and the good students that we are, is we've internalized all of that. And then we think we have to meet all of those insane standards. And we put tremendous pressure on ourselves to do that. And then we feel horrible shame when, guess what, we fall short, And so it's a recipe for insanity. And, that's another reason why I think it's so important to have a tribe of other women around you who want to live in a more grounded, authentic way, because we need to start writing new narratives about what it means to be a working woman, about what it means to be a mother, about, what it means to be a sister, a daughter, a friend, a volunteer at the school, whatever the category is.
You have so many resources for people. Do you also have a group that they can join so they can be part of a community?
I do. And I actually, but right now that group, there isn't a new one starting, but I think in early 2023, I'll be starting a new group based on the book, The Soul Solution. So the best thing to do would just be sign up for the email list or the newsletter, and then you'll get a notification anytime I'm starting new groups. I'm often doing group visioning and webinars and workshops and things all the time throughout the year on different topics, because I really do think as we bring groups of women together, that is how we're going to start to create this new paradigm and create, real change for ourselves, but also for the planet.
Well, Vanessa, where can our listeners connect with you, be part of your community, and learn more about your work?
Yes. So if you go to my website, which is Vanessa Loder, LODER.com, and then if you want to get the book, you can go to vanessaloder.com/soul, SOUL -solution, or just click on the tab that says book. We put it in all caps just to make sure people can see it. But if you buy the book through that page, I actually have a ton of free guided meditations and videos and downloadable PDFs as bonus gifts with the book. So that page, it actually links to all the retailers that have the book. But if you just enter your name and email on that page, you'll also get all the bonus resources that are supplemental to the book. So you can have a lot of these meditations, the journaling practices, videos, all that kind of stuff, because I really do love to give people tools, so that you can not just learn about these concepts, but actually apply them and embody them and create real change in your life.
That's such an important piece, especially in a non-judgmental manner, because there's so much going on during this time. And I feel like your work really addresses that.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah. And the other thing I just want to say is I kind of find myself towing the line where a lot of self-help books for women, it's almost like we're inferring, oh, great, one more thing we need to fix about ourselves. Like we're the problem, And so I'm trying to express in the book how you are not the problem. And if you're overwhelmed and exhausted and burned out, there is nothing wrong with you. You are simply responding to the insane systems and culture that we find ourselves living in. And so it's so important for women to not go into shame or criticism, and to view these tools not as hey, you need to fix yourself because you're broken and you're the problem, but to view these tools as, how do I take my power back in a world that continually negates it?
Such an important question to ask yourself and community be a part of. Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's such a joy. I really appreciate it. And I hope that if any women got energetic breadcrumbs hearing, me talk about the book or any of the other resources, that you'll follow those breadcrumbs.
Well, thank you, Vanessa. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, The Soul Solution, a guide for brilliant, overwhelmed women to quiet the noise, find their superpower, and finally feel satisfied. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.